Hi, I'm Stephen Reich. I'm on the phone with Ann from Pikapi Podcast, and tonight we're going to be recording our discussion of the music of Pokemon Duel, the mobile app it's got an odd history, but I think it is still important, and its music is definitely still worth talking about. It's a little bit, but it is a little bit of an odd happenstance, or whatever you want to call it. There, I guess, is one way to put it. Let's see. Let me just thought of something. Well,
so in the meantime, it's time to duel.
No, unfortunately, not that duel.
Darn.
But this is going to be an unusual one just because neither Ann or I have actually got a chance to play this game while it was still active. And it is formally discontinued. You cannot get it. Unlike Pokemon Shuffle, which has not had updates for a very long time, but the mobile version you can still get. We both had to look into this, although I do have a very small inroad on this, which I will explain during our discussion. But Ann, why don't you talk a little bit about what you've been up to lately?
Yes. So on Pikapi Podcast, let's see, May is going for her third ribbon, and Pikachu just got amnesia, and we were all very sad about it. Ash had a bit of a meltdown over it. And then the big news for Pikapi Podcast is I have finally done the thing I said I would do, and I have re-recorded episodes and compiled all the episodes and edited out all the overtly copyrighted music. So if you have wanted to get into my Pokemon anime podcast, but we, couldn't ever find episode 1, now is your chance. Tell your friends. Every single episode is up on the blog, pkapipodcast.blogspot.com. And yeah, that includes like movie 2, which I had to re-record.
Was wondering.
Gosh, that movie just destroyed me, but it is done. It is re-recorded, as is episode 15, episode 141, episode I think 190 something. I don't know. A lot of episodes. And then on the Patreon, if you're interested in Sonic, you can also listen to me rewatch the Knuckles mini-series and profess my love for my new Rastafarian son, who is not a Pokemon, but would wreck at the Pokemon League.
Yeah, so let's see here. All right. Just adjusting some volumes there. But yeah, it's nice that we have 2000, especially since obviously, we do music discussions here. It's kind of nice that that's an important one.
Yeah, it's taken me like literal years to get around to doing it just because it's such an ambitious project. Like every time I do a movie episode, it destroys me. But that one in particular, like I think this time it didn't take me as long because I remembered all my old jokes. But like the first time it was like, I swear I was in front of the microphone for like 4 hours. So you can imagine all the research time and then editing time on the front end of that. It's a monster.
Yeah. So let's see. What else do we need to do here? Do we need to dispel any myths about the Switch 2? I was talking with some folks about that earlier today and last weekend at Midwest Gaming Classic because they haven't done the best job over at Nintendo of making clear about all the stuff there. Just to clarify a few things, in the U.S., it looks like $70 is the normal price for retail games, but $80 is the price for the Mario Kart game. And in other territories, it's can be 80, 90 pricing. So that's where that comes around. So it's like 90 euros in Europe for the Mario Kart game if you want to get it physically. Let's see, what is it? Yeah, the second one is physical games may or may not have the game on the cartridge. Some of them will, some of them won't, depending on the size and other factors there. Let's see. Oh, so we know that ZA is going to be a dual release, not unlike Metroid Prime 4.
Dual release?
In other words, it's going to be for the original Switch, and there's going to be an enhanced...
Thank you!
Did you?
I am too broke to buy a new system. Thank you, Pokemon. Thank you, Arceus. Thank you, everybody. I appreciate this.
Yeah. I myself, I am trying to see if I can find a way where I can use my credit card miles, but it's not horribly unaffordable, and I'm given what they're putting into it. But yeah, ZA is going to be a cross thing just like that. And also, but they're also doing paid updates to some games that are getting more substantial stuff, and then games like Scarlet and Violet that are getting more fix/slash performance bumps on the new Switch are going to be free. So there's a dichotomy there that's confused a lot of folks.
Yeah.
And I swear there was a fourth like common misconception about the games, about the system, or something like that there. And maybe I know we're getting eventually Gale of Darkness and Coliseum on the expansion pack for Switch 2 Online, which will be nice because that's normally a I don't know, maybe the prices have gone down since the announcement a little bit at least. But I know that like Gale of Darkness for the disc is like $200 plus, depending on the place you go there. So I'm very glad I still have my copy. That's for sure. So very, very, very glad.
Yeah.
In that regard.
Yeah, a lot of people love those games and are probably rejoicing.
Yeah, and we did do episodes on those a number of years ago, which I did post about a ways back. So we did talk about both of those games, and they're very impressive music. So I'm trying to remember what the fourth, because I did cut them slack, and I apologize for being that person at Midwest Gaming Classic last weekend. There was an actual Switch 2 panel, and they were definitely a little bit discombobulated about some of the details there. And I said, yeah, Nintendo could definitely have done a clearer job of putting some of this stuff out, and hopefully they're putting together a document of some sort at some point and tweaking the marketing maybe a little bit to be more clear about all that stuff. So
yeah, we'll see.
They got the name right. It's everything underneath it. The only other name I would have considered maybe would be Super Nintendo Switch, but
yeah, that would have been funny, but probably would not have helped.
Yeah, you never know. But that would be like the only other name I would remotely consider. So yes, they got the name is less confusing. Everything underneath it, still a little bit there. All right. Well, we're going to do this discussion. Like I said, this is Pokémon Duel. This is a mobile game that you can no longer download. I don't even know if you have it. You can still play the solo mode. We'll talk about why it may not have been that successful and all that stuff as part of our game discussion largely. But yeah, so definitely interesting. All right. So one second. Let me get my notes up. Annie, you just about ready to start?
I am ready.
Hi, I'm Stephen Reich here at the PokePress Studios in Madison, Wisconsin. I'm on the phone with Anne from Pikapi Podcast. And in this latest entry in our Pokemon side game music discussions, we're talking about the music of Pokemon Duel. Now, if you don't remember this, you're probably not alone. This was a mobile game released, well, it was released in 2016 in Japan, 2017 in the rest of the world, at least in the countries it did get released in. We'll talk more about that in our game discussion. But yeah, it's actually kind of loosely based on the trading figure game, which was a short-lived thing outside of Japan. And their goal with this was sort of to bring some of that in. But yeah, going back to the release, this is kind of weird. This is the... Let me redo some of that so I have a good splice point. So yeah, talking about that, but its release was a little bit odd because it was so staggered. It released in April of 2016 in Japan. It was the 12th on Android and the 19th on iOS. Don't know if there were some late certification things or whatever they had to iron out there or whatever, or if there was a 1-week exclusivity deal with Android or something like that. It came to the rest of the world in January of 2017. And that was for both iOS and Android. No 3DS or Switch wasn't out until a few months after the Western release of this game anyway, so it wasn't there. Let's see, this was developed by a company called, I think, Heroes, Heroz, and they had worked on a shogi game not too long before this. And do you know anything about this company?
Not a ton. It's just that they seem to be kind of renowned for being able to make really good, like, computer AI for strategy games. Um, so, like, this just seems to be what they do.
Yeah, I did read up on some of the AI stuff, or how they built the AI for this particular game, which was kind of interesting. It was a bit of a different time then, obviously.
Mm.
Um, Now, full disclosure, neither Anne nor I actually got a chance to play this game while it was out. It was discontinued in like 2019, I think, right before Pokemon Masters came out, which is ostensibly its pseudo replacement. But Anne, I guess we're going to have to give our excuses for not playing this. Anne, what was your impediment?
My excuse is that I don't think I actually realized this game existed. I cannot recall having ever heard of it. It does seem to have come at that a time like post Pokemon Go, like around the time of Magikarp Jump and a lot of other like Pokemon media that just like it felt like a glut that I was having trouble keeping up with, I guess. Like there's a limited amount of time in the day you cannot play all the Pokemon games, download all the Pokemon apps. So that I think is my excuse is that I just don't recall ever hearing about it and no one in my life was playing it, I guess, so it just never came up on the radar.
Well, I did hear about it while it was a thing, and I also heard, or I should say, and I also played a demo of the trading figure game back in that was well before this. So it's kind of surprising they would dig this up and turn it into a mobile game. If I don't know what other ideas they had at the time, um, but I never got into it. And also, Sun and Moon had released a few months earlier, back in November, so they were still relatively recent. Um, and so maybe I don't know. Like I said, I just never got around to it because I think I was not a super avid Go player. Like off and on, I have been, but like I don't know. I think we're going to talk in our game discussion about why this maybe wasn't that successful, and I think there are several reasons, but timing is quite possibly a big one.
Mm.
Now, as far as who worked on the music, that is no mystery. That is Shota Kageyama, who is a very well-known name in the world of Pokemon music. He actually, we've been doing this side game discussion. I think our first one was Pokemon Pinball, and he worked on the music for that. Also worked on the main series game, starting with Generation 2. I think he's moved on to some other projects since this, but he is very, very familiar with the franchise, and I think that's going to come up a little bit in bits and pieces in our actual music discussion.
Yeah, if you've not listened to our previous episodes, he's since become a freelancer, but he's still come back to cooperate with the game and collaborate on things. So he's doing well for himself.
Yes, hardly an unknown. Now, as far as the overall style, I think you can kind of almost divide it into sort of two groups. Like, there's a lot of stuff, especially like the actual like battle themes that are very electronic. And then there's like I don't want to say everything else is completely scattershot. There are some threads and through lines there, but there's kind of the other parts of the music that are used a lot for, excuse me, specific locations and menus and stuff like that that sort of fall into the other bucket. And do you think that's kind of fair?
I would say it is, yeah, it is your dance music and it is your South American, Caribbean island vibes music. It is one of those two.
For the most part, that describes a lot of the music in this game. Not all of it. I think I
Yeah,
picked
there
out
are
one.
cultures, but
I think I picked out one that is not in that vein. And as you've probably guessed, we've done our usual thing here. We've each picked out 3 songs from this game. Let's see. I picked out the, Training Center theme, the Quest/Cutscenes theme, and the Hotel Atlantis Dual Pins theme. Now, obviously, the names here are going to be a little bit unofficial. We obviously had to look these all up. There's not, to the best of my knowledge, there was never really like a sound test in the game. And you may get very different names. We'll try and bring some of those up depending on which playlist you look at. But Anne, without further ado, why don't you tell us what your 3 tracks were?
yes, I have Versus Dawn Roger, the Pince Mode Training Duel, aka Surrounding, and welcome to Carmont Island.
Yeah, so kind of the thing. We'll get into what pinch mode is once we get to those tracks, but we'll explain a little bit mechanically. But we try to usually go kind of in order. I mean, there's a quest mode to this, and there's also an online competitive mode, or at least there was when the game was active. But in any case, Anne, let's talk about your first song. Welcome to Carmonte Island. Hopefully, I got that about right.
Yeah, this is kind of one of the first tracks you'll hear if you start to play the game, and it's very inviting. It's very fun. The melody is catchy and has very interesting progressions in it. Like it just makes your brain happy the way it kind of I don't know, there I don't know if minor is the right, but there's like I don't know, the intervals that it hits is just a little bit unexpected, but like very delicious to the human ear. I very much love the drum beat, and then there's is it kind of just got like an island rhythm to it. So it's just great to start off the game. It's so fun.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a very welcoming theme there. I did say island slash vacation instrumentation, which is common to a lot of this game. A lot of synth, piano, and electric guitar. Electric guitar isn't super overdriven, so it doesn't, you know.
Yeah, not so much in this track, but
But some other ones will be very interesting. Let me tell you. But this one, I think it does get the job done. It's obviously, as you've probably guessed from the title, Carmonte is the name of whatever this fictional location is. I don't know if it's supposed to be based on a real world location. Talking about Pokemon Masters, we'll make some comparisons to that since that ostensibly replaced this game. That game was, as we now know, was originally going to have a map based on Italy. Not sure if this was supposed to be somewhere else, but yeah. Anything else though about this track, Ann?
um nope, that was pretty much all I had to say. Like just that it is I don't know, it really perfectly hits the job it was meant to do, but there again, there's something about that melody that is just the littlest bit unique that I would encourage everyone to go listen to.
All right. Well, in that case, let's move on to my first track. This is the training center, and I think it's also used in some of the menus um, throughout the game. But basically, this is used for things like the map and the tutorial section of the game, and so on and so forth. It's got, it's one of the non-electronic-ish or less electronic tracks in here. It's got an acoustic guitar, drums, piano, and a little bit of flute. And one reason I kind of picked it out, this is not intended, this is very relaxed. It's more like spa like. So when you say training center in a Pokemon game, you might think of something that sounds more like gym music, like you would hear in a real world exercise gym. That's not what this is for sure. It's supposed to ease you into the stuff there. And I assume you had some similar observations.
Yeah, I kind of have a note that it reminds me low key something about the spirit of it of Pokemon Concierge. Just again that relaxing vibe, the guitar noodling, and there's some bongos. I really like those features of the track.
Yeah, definitely not completely dissimilar. In fact, actually, the story mode takes place over a series of hotels, one of which is, I guess, called Concierge, or there's a character called Concierge, or something like that. No relation. I doubt that would serve as a major inspiration for the Netflix series.
Surely not, yeah, but cool nonetheless.
Yeah, but definitely a vacation-y vibe to this location here. But Anne, let's go on to your second pick. This is the training duel pinch mode. So just to sort of explain, I'm sure some of the folks at home know what a pinch mode is in a video game. It's usually a point in a battle or whatever where things get more serious. In the case of Pokemon Duel, that's when one of the players gets their one or more of their pieces over to their opponent's side of the board and is therefore usually within striking distance of the home base. Like I said, we'll talk more about the game mechanics. But all the duel themes always in this game pretty much always have a variant called pinch mode, where things get a little more up tempo. One of the pinch mode ones we've picked is the training duel, and Anne, this was yours. Tell us what sort of stuck out to you.
Well, this is basically a dance track from my childhood. Like it is very Sandstorm esque. Like the second I heard it was like bringing back memories of like the high school dance and the PG-13 rave. And there's this one like womp womp sound in there that's very cool and hard to identify. So it kind of just was a blast from the past for me. Um, and yeah, that's not unique, I suppose, but it's unique in the realm of Pokemon music, maybe.
Yeah, I suppose so. I mean, I put down electro dance. I'm not sure that's quite the right thing there, if that's specific genre or not. But
Works for me.
piano and synth, and I said it had a DDR vibe, which is,
Yeah, you would
you know,
DDR to a track like this, yes.
there's a fair number of the battle themes, or the dual themes in this one fit into that category. Anything else you wanted to call out here?
No, just this is a track I would listen to just by itself, I think.
All right. Well, let's go on to my second pick. This is like I said, depending on where you look this up, we don't have official names, more so than usual on this one. You might see it referred to as quest or cutscenes or rest theme here, but this is used parts of the story mode and a few other places and stuff like that. As you might guess from the name, this is a pretty peaceful track. It's got some stringed instruments in there. And one thing that really stuck out to me was that this is one of those tracks that seems like it pulls influence from various parts of the franchise, which obviously Shota would have been very familiar with working on this game. And I think there's like the rhythm part of it almost sounds a little bit Mystery Dungeon to me. There's also some influence from mostly the earlier, um, let's see, Umbrella Pokemon games, so like Hey You Pikachu and Pokemon Channel. It has that, and also the kind of the vibe of a starting town in particular from or an opening area from one of the main games. I think one of the comments I read on one of the videos there says gave it a reference the infamous IGN Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire review score. But Anne, what did you notice here?
This is the one that is also called Rest, right?
That's correct. That's the
Yeah.
alternate name. Like I said, we don't.
No, I just
We're
wanted to make sure I was on the same page.
Yeah, we're flailing around on these names a little more than usual, just because of the sort of discarded nature of this game.
hmm Yeah, no, one of the things I like about this track is it's very bouncy, kind of like a children's song. Like there's something very playful about that. Just the way it hits the notes just kind of has a very nice bouncy rhythm to it that's very fun and playful.
Yeah. So, like I said, I do. Sorry, let me rephrase that. Do you have any thoughts on the various influences from within the franchise I mentioned? Any thoughts of your
Um,
own?
like there are definitely a lot of things that sound similar. I am not as good as the name that tune and picking out motifs as you are, so I couldn't name anything specific, but it certainly does sound very familiar of like root themes and things that we have heard before.
Yeah, if someone played for this in a vacuum, I think they would say this is something Pokemon related. Is a pretty good
Mm.
shot there. So definitely nailed it down there. All right, let's talk about my third song. It's another one of those Pinch themes. Now, like I said, unofficial names and maybe not the best stuff, but one playlist refers to this as the Angry Brenda theme, which is a boss from a different place in the game than the hotel this is supposedly associated with, because the other playlist says this is the Hotel Atlantis Duel Pinch theme. And I think it's definitely used there in the Atlantis Hotel, but that's not where Brenda is. But in
Wherever
any
she
case,
is, though, she's angry.
apparently, in any case, this one is like I said, it's the pinch mode one, so it's got a rapid Latin beat as opposed to the regular one, which is a little more calm and smooth, but still kind of in the same style. And I enjoyed listening to this. But Anne, do you have any opinions on it?
I really love the Latin flavor going on in this track, and it fits with a lot of the other tracks that have, like, again, that kind of stereotypical Latin island guitar noodling, bongos, that kind of thing. But like, it just takes it up a bit, and um, I don't know. It's a very fun rhythm. It's a very emotional rhythm. Um, that can kind of go a lot of different places, and it's just something that little bit different, so it doesn't feel too repetitive.
Yeah. So with that, let's go on to Anne, your third pick, which is the
Yes.
Don Roger duel. Now, there's the Roger family, I believe, is the sort of antagonizing force in this game. We'll talk more about the story in our game discussion, but this is another one of those, basically a boss, basically a gym leader type deal. And why don't you tell us a little bit about this track?
Yeah, so this track kind of evokes I don't know, imageries of Tron. It has kind of that electronic dance beat. There's a very, in fact, at one point, a very dun 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 dance beat, kind of trancy at points. But it also has a very emotive melody that is not mixed so that it is very clear above the underlying beat. It's kind of buried in the middle, which I thought was very interesting. And then, of course, the rhythm is just going heavy, and the general beat and the chords. So, yeah, it's a very interesting track that kind of just reminds me a lot of Tron vibes.
Yeah, I felt this had similar instrumentation to some of the other electronic dual themes, but a distinct melody for sure. And one place I put down some influence is maybe the more electronic tracks in the Battle Revolution game, and maybe some of the other Genius Sonority games, the more electronic stuff there. Like I said, I think Shota was kind of at the nexus of a lot of this. He certainly, if he wasn't, he's a freelancer in that. That's all right. Let me rewind
Mhm.
a bit. But definitely very aware of the franchise, and maybe some of this inspired him as well. Anything you wanted to add to that?
Um, I do like how this track has different parts. So like I mentioned, like there are moments where that heavy dance beat comes in and it gets a little like heavy dance and then a little bit more trancy, and then moments where it's just a little bit less of that hard pulsing dance beat. So I like that it kind of has levels.
All right. Well, let's see. As far as sound effects, that's pretty typical. There's no voice acting in this game, like there is at least some in Pokemon Masters. Um, so not much to say there. Even though there is a story, there's the character. The stuff is all text. As far as like the audio quality and the musical quality, I felt it was quite good. Although I do wish they had some of these were maybe a little bit longer and stuff. Obviously, with the pinch mode going in and out of that, that maybe doesn't means they don't need to be as long as they otherwise would have to be. But all the
Mhm.
same, I think these could be developed further. Not to throw shade on Shota Kageyama, because whatever amount of time he was given for this or whatever is what he got, and I'm guessing that's also part of the structure there. But and
I
any more general opinions about this one?
Yeah, I was gonna just wonder. I wonder how many people playing listened to the soundtrack while they were playing on a regular basis, because this was a phone app game. They may have been playing like on the train or places where you might not have the volume turned on, or might not necessarily be wearing headphones to listen to the music. That's just curious and a thought I'm throwing out into the universe. If you played this game, let us know if you played in public with or without music.
Yeah, some devices won't turn on the music by default until you actually plug in headphones, and others do. So like I said, not bad by any stretch of the imagination. I do feel like they could have done more, and maybe they actually did do more. We'll talk more about that in our game discussion
Indeed.
because it's kind of interesting. Okay, one second. I got to scroll down.
Not a worry.
Okay, but yeah, so with our music discussion out of the way, like I said, we'll get to a game discussion after the outro. But I want to bring in some feedback. Remember, if you ever have comments, think we missed a song, missed a point, or whatever like that, you can always give us a comment in one of these videos. You can drop us an email, pokepress@gmail.com, or you can find us on Blue Sky at Pokepress. So, speaking of Blue Sky, I have a little thread there. It's actually sort of a line of thought I've had for a while here. So, let me go ahead and let's see here. Bring this up so the folks at home can see it. Chrome tab. That's the one. Okay. All right. So I've been thinking recently a fair bit about the Who's That Pokemon, or it was as it was originally known in Japan, Who Is It? Bumper segments. Bumpers are usually before or after going to a commercial break, and are used there. But in any case, I was trying to see if there was an actual origin story for it, and I posted this on Blue Sky. Excuse me. Has there ever been an explanation as to the origin of Who's That Pokemon bumpers? I know it started in the Japanese version of the show, but I'd be curious to know if it was something the writers came up with, or a suggestion from Game Freak, or whatever. So I have Dr. Truth, the person who I've met on here and who has followed me and had some interesting things to say about some of the stuff on the anime and stuff like that. But he says, given the I don't know if it's actually a he. So, but in any case, this person says, given the origins of most of the anime's quirks that became popular across the franchise, it was probably developed by some combination of producers, directors early on. I Choose You, Pokemon Master were all just snazzy things they came up with, and Who's That Pokemon was probably the same. And I definitely appreciate this reply, but when you have someone at your disposal who knows a fair bit more Japanese than you do, and I did, and bless her, I did ask Anne to see what she could find out about this, because it is like a big cultural thing. I mean, I don't think the dub of Horizons has an equivalent right now, but it was used in the marketing of Detective Pikachu, the movie, and stuff like that. And of course, it gets referenced online all the time as either intentionally or as a joke, or and back at like, so those of you who follow the channel and the podcast know I went to a Who's That Pokemon panel at Anime Milwaukee earlier in 2025. So, Anne, what did your research turn up here?
Yeah, so this is actually a very common thing to do in Japanese television and especially children's television since long before Pokemon was ever created. It's just culturally a thing they do is that they want television and especially children's television programming to be interactive and on educational shows especially they would have a lot of these type of bumpers where they would ask questions and when the commercial came back you would shout out the answer. But even in adult programming they often do things like this, and if you've watched anime that's been ripped like straight from the TV, you might still see little things at the bottom or during a bumper where it's like press this button on your remote to interact or pick this option or whatever. Like this is very much a thing in Japan, to the point that I think in education for a while it was almost like a mandated thing. So Dr. Truth is probably onto something, that it probably was a combination between the creators and the executives at TV Tokyo. And it was probably less of a question of like, should we do this, or someone coming up with the idea, and more of a like, what should we do for the bumpers? Like it was probably just a given that some sort of interactive quizzy type of thing was going to happen. But unfortunately, I could not find any one employee who was like, that was my idea to start Pokemon da da da. Like, no, sadly.
Yeah, I mean, it hardly was, it certainly wasn't invented here. It probably goes back to radio, to be honest.
Possibly.
It's common in, you said educational shows, but also quiz shows. Oftentimes, news programs will have a factoid going into and out of a break or in a transition period or something like that, just so that they can put some context into a topic or whatever. So it is hardly a new thing there. But of course, Who's That Pokemon is probably, strangely enough, the most famous, or at least one of the most famous iterations of that. You want to call it a trope, I guess you can, in there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but as it to being a cultural thing, you can kind of see echoes of the Who's That Pokemon segments in other parts of the Pokemon franchise. Like not just in the way it kind of evolved to become different kinds of bumpers and whatever, but in a lot of their ending themes, there's like Japan specifically developed a lot of ending themes that the children could sing along to, like let's play Pokemon Shitori and like Pokemon Ieru Kana. Can you name all the Pokemon? There was also I think it was the Seven Colored Rainbow song where like Silent turns around and starts conducting the audience watching, and then the Momoiro Clover Zed song where like there's a dance that the kids can all do even in the theater when they're watching the movie. Like, so like this is a thing that Japan has often kind of done, is just to find ways to get interaction with its audience.
Yeah, and it's also a viewer retention tactic as long as it makes sense within the context. You don't see this much on serious dramas for
True,
obvious
much
reasons.
less.
There's a reason it's more common on educational programs, kids shows, news, and
Comedies,
stuff like
yeah.
that, and not on NCIS or whatever. But
Right. Right.
they have their own going into and out of a commercial trope for that show. But
True.
um, let's see. But one thing I did want to point out, now, like I said, I think this was probably a minor influence, if anything, but I did want to point out something I've been going through recently. Let me go ahead and just present the picture, because I think it's probably kind of speaks for itself as kind of an interesting setup to my little joke here, I guess. Let's see. Let's go ahead and share a window. All right. Hopefully, this was the April Fool's Day picture I put out on Blue Sky for this about a week and a half before we recorded this. So this is a screenshot from the 1990s Where on Earth is Carmen Sandiego cartoon. Not to be confused with the PBS game shows, which also were quite popular. But I've been going through the animated series as part of doing an AI upscale model, and I decided to have a little fun with one of the images. In the first episode, Carmen goes to a Van Gogh exhibit and steals. It's actually even funnier than you may think right now. Steals part of the Van Gogh picture, specifically the eye. So you can imagine her doing that to Gray Hat Pikachu over there. So but I wanted to bring this up because, yes, it's not the biggest influence on the Pokemon anime, even if they studied this or looked at some episodes, because this would have been like this show was dubbed into Japanese. And it started in the U.S. in '94, and so would have taken a year or two probably to get to Japan. So this might have been one of the few, like if they had to look at other video game cartoons as a reference in any of the development of the show, this might have been one of the ones they looked at. Not saying it was a huge influence or anything, as Anne has explained the idea there, but this is an educational show, and it has geography trivia going into and out of commercial breaks. So hardly invented that either, but I did want to kind of share that.
We all learned a lot from Carmen Sandiego's geography quizzes.
Yeah, and actually there's some interesting parallels there, most notably that both franchises are based on, to varying degrees, on real-world geography. And Pokemon has had its own educational spin-off type deals over the years as well. There's some kind of interesting stuff that I've noticed that I've been going through the series again. So wanted to kind of call that out. And they're actually, I should point out that those games were indeed released in Japan. In fact, there's actually a special like Japanese edition, I think it's a Where in Japan is Carmen Sandiego, that Broderbund made on its own. Unlike the state of North Dakota, they had to commission one. That's if you're wondering where in North Dakota is Carmen Sandiego comes from, it's because the state government commissioned it from Broderbund. It's literally what happened.
Interesting.
Yep. So, but yeah, so that possibly a small influence there. Certainly, if they had that readily available that they had taped at home to do a little research on what that is. But I'm sure, like I said, Japanese culture obviously a huge influence, and it just seems like that was the form in which it did come over here, though, because it was kept in the dub for Who's That Pokemon, and they made a definite memory there. It's kind of interesting. I don't recall too many other, especially non-educational shows, trying to do something similar. But I guess perhaps Pokemon is uniquely being a very, with a large number of creatures and so on and so forth, has a depth to pull from there that some other shows wouldn't. I don't know.
That's true. I do remember. I feel like I remember cartoons like having like a little end cap where they might do like a world trivia thing or have like a little lesson of some kind. But yeah, like now that I think about it, I'm trying to think of a Who's That Pokemon parallel, and it's not coming to mind. That doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It's just that my 30-year-old memory is failing me.
Yeah, so kind of an interesting little tidbit there. All right. Well, we are going to continue through the Pokemon side games and doing music discussions. So we go in North American release order. That's why this particular discussion came after Pokemon Go instead of before, because we go, like I said, by the Western North American release date. But our next one up in that order is another mobile game. It's Magikarp Jump, and Anne is very familiar with this one.
Floppy
And
fish supremacy.
And it was loosely adapted into an episode, it seems, in Journeys, which we'll certainly bring up there. But thankfully, this one, if you, at least for now, who knows, maybe Monday they'll discontinue it. Oh gosh, with our luck, who
We'll see.
knows? I should probably try and download it soon, so I have a copy. But yeah, this is a competitive game themed around Magikarp. Besides Pikachu, in terms of Pokemon that have gotten their own games, I mean, this is pretty much it. And unless you're going to look at stuff on like the Pokemon Mini, of course. But yeah, so it should be pretty interesting to talk about that. I think, listened briefly to a couple of the tracks, but there's still plenty. We might tack on a little bit extra there. We'll see how that all works out because there's a couple other games like Type and Learn, and there's a Rumble game. Rumble, let's see. Oh, the second Rumble game on the 3DS. We might squeeze a song or two in there, but definitely talking about Magikarp Jump. It's a very interesting type of thing there, and I'm sure our game discussion on that will have to brainstorm some other Pokemon that can get their own games. But all right. Well, until then, Anne, thank you very much for being here.
Thank you.
This has been Stephen Reich. All right, folks, thanks. All right, we'll do a little bit of a break and get some water. And then we'll do our game discussion where we talk about the actual mechanics of it. But luckily, if this had been a game that we had missed that had come out in the 2000s, we'd been pretty out of luck in terms, like, there wouldn't be nearly as much footage as when this was in the mobile era. There's plenty of footage of a full playthrough of the quest mode, and several of those out there probably. Number of online matches, so it is well archived, at least for the time being, in terms of what it actually played like. So, yeah, but I'm going to get some water, and we'll be back.
What to talk about for this vamping? Well, for those of you who don't follow Pikapi Podcast, I should let you know Magikarp is the love of my life. It is the best Pokemon ever. It is a proud, strong soldier. Magikarp is like my Patronus. It is my familiar, my daemon, like everything. I love Magikarp. Like, I really just love the idea that it's completely useless. But like, the conceit of Pokemon is like, if you're a good trainer, like, any Pokemon can be a champion. Like, you love your Pokemon. It's not about just catching the strongest and throwing away your Pokemon if they're weak. Like, especially the Pokemon anime, like, Pokemon are about so much more than just, is it strong enough to win a battle? So I'm always kind of like, there's a metaphor for life in there about, you don't have to evolve into a Gyarados to have value. You can have value just as a Magikarp. And so, like, I have latched on to Magikarp as like my driving force. And I have like assembled teams of Magikarp to go take on the Elite Four, and we have won. My proudest moment in all of Pokemon gaming was one time I had an online battle. Gosh, which game was this? I don't remember, but it might have been Diamond. No, not Diamond and Pearl. Maybe it was Kalos. Anyway, I had an online battle with somebody with my team of 3 Magikarp, and I took down a Zorua with nothing but a Magikarp that knew Bounce, because Bounce has a chance to paralyze. I paralyzed that legendary Pokemon, and my Magikarp took it down, and somewhere across the world there is someone screaming at the idiocy of that, but I am holding on to that memory close in my heart. Their next Pokemon like just wiped me out. So like, but
kind of reminds me of the song parody. I wrote a parody of Pink's So What called Snow Runt, where someone couldn't believe they got knocked out by a snow runt. It's and then they sort of talked about how they were rebuilding their team and stuff like that. So that little quip there reminds me of that. All right, well, we're going to do our game discussion. We did, thankfully, like I said, have plenty of footage to work from. So leave a little pause, and we'll go from there. All right. Well, despite us not getting to go hands-on with this game, there is still plenty of footage and other material out there. So we are going to do a game discussion, despite our inexperience with it. Just to remind the folks at home, I have a very small amount of experience technically because I did play a demo of the trading figure game that this is based on. But that is a bit of a different beast still. But yeah, so the basic goal of this game is that it's what's called a capture the flag type of game, um, where your goal is to get to the enemy's base and put a Pokemon there. That's the main way to win. You can also win if they have no Pokemon in play and you've blocked their entry points on the board, then you also win there. Are kind of the two main ways to win. But your goal is to move your Pokemon around the board. They can attack other Pokemon, although winning battles, while potentially helpful, is not, like I said, it's not the main objective. And you have different characters. We'll talk more about acquisition of new figures and so on and so forth. But like the basic mechanics all seem to make sense. Like I said, it's just a capture the flag type of game where you try to get the enemy base. Anne, did you want to add anything there as far as the base mechanics?
I mean, are we going to talk about moves like blue moves, purple moves, red moves?
Oh yeah, we're definitely going to talk about combat. But as far as like the overall objective, was that pretty straightforward there from what you saw?
It is more straightforward than the tutorial you'll have to play at the beginning of the game. I struggled with this.
Yeah, it's not. I mean, there is a lot of depth into it, but there are some things that also hamper that, which we'll probably talk about. But yeah, so one of the major aspects is when your Pokemon, one player's Pokemon, ends their movement next to another one, they have the option to do a battle. Mm-hmm. And each Pokemon in the game, there's a spinner on it. And so, yeah, if you don't directly choose your moves there, you spin it, and then you get there. There's the white moves, which are generally just attack moves that do a certain amount of damage, and sometimes have extra effects. There's purple ones that have an effect and also negate a white move. Let's see, there's blue moves, which are usually defensive in nature. You either escape or protect yourself or something like that. Let's see. There's gold moves, which are extra powerful and I think have higher priority and so on and so forth. And then there's the dreaded red miss space on that thing there. That's always at least a little bit there, although there are modifiers that can change it throughout the game. And I think this is one of the things that really frustrated folks because there is strategy in terms of your movement and some item type deals you get to use to either like try and spin again or to move certain Pokemon around and so on and so forth. But whether or not you get an attack off is extraordinarily random. It actually reminded me, I remembered that I never played Emerald, but I know that one of the places in there, the Battle Palace, has a similar mechanic where you can choose your Pokemon, but you can't choose what moves they use, and there's all sorts of little rules about that, which is not completely dissimilar. I don't know, this seems to be, and one of the major hang-ups folks had with this game. Do you kind of think that would have bothered you a lot?
I didn't even play. I watched a Let's Player, and like 10 minutes in, I was very frustrated. So yes, like I definitely can see like there's a lot of strategy, and there's like a lot of I can see like if you had the patience to really learn this game, you probably could get really good and kind of embrace both the strategy aspect of it and the randomness of it in a way. But yeah, like it's just it's a hurdle to get over that. Just with the board game aspect of it all is interesting. It's a Pokemon game, but you're not really battling, and then you have to spin, and then like the plates. We haven't even talked about those. So yeah, like there's a lot going on in this game that I think would have been very frustrating for a lot of people to kind of wrap their heads around. It is nothing like the Pokemon competition thingies that we have been used to up to this point. Um, yeah.
Way it's almost like the Pokemon is one that you've traded in, and it's actually like disobedient because you don't have enough badges. Like you
Ooh,
don't
I
know if
like
it'll
that.
exactly do what you want. It is kind of like that, and that's a mechanic in the main game. It's designed to keep you from steamrolling the entire game with something you've traded over from someone else, and
You
so
know, I if that was the conceit of the game was like you were like just like a Pokemon ranger or something, or like a Pokemon, I don't know, rehabilitation expert or something, and you just got a bunch of Pokemon who like do not give a crap about your orders, and it's just a dice roll of whether I that would almost be more entertaining. Like,
but especially since that comes at the normally the at or near the end of a turn where that spin occurs. And like I said, you have things to mitigate it. You also have things that can potentially add damage and so on. There's a whole, and like I said, as I sort of alluded to when I explained the different colors, there's a whole hierarchy there of what beats what. If it ends up being damage, then if it's like two white attacks against each other that do damage, the higher damage wins, and the defeated Pokemon goes to a holding area
the
that help
Pokemon Center.
and that we can't go over all the rules of the game because it would take up so much time, but you get the idea there. But then, like I said, other moves like the purple moves, which usually do some sort of status thing, will beat out most of the white moves and so on and so forth. And then like I said, we all that stuff combines together, and then you get to the very end and you spin, and maybe you get what you need, and maybe you didn't. It's like there's strategy, but at the end, like I think it's easier to accept if you have a move like when you're choosing a move, like rock slide or something like that. It has a decent chance to miss, or something like that. Or if you're the wild Articuno person with 4 ice moves, one of which is sheer cold. That was within the last year or so.
Mhm.
You can sort of accept that, but the fact that you might not even get the move you want is weird, and I think that did turn some folks off as a core component. And then I believe that is something that was inherited from the trading figure game. I believe there was a small chance on pretty much every spinner to miss. It is also possible, by the way, for both players to miss, in which case nothing happens.
Mm.
So that's pretty interesting as well. Now, as far as where you get these figures, well, obviously there's starters, but this is a loot box or gachapon type game. So you get most of your stuff by spending the in-game currency to randomly draw stuff. Which actually they had to end this game a little earlier in the Netherlands because I think they passed a loot box ban there that went into effect, and consequently, Pokemon Masters is also not in some of those countries, or in those countries that have loot box bans as well, since it uses very similar mechanics that are similarly regulated. Which I mean, that's kind of how booster packs work in the trading card game. But I don't know, Anne. How would you think you would have felt about that one?
Um, it's hard to say because, as you say, with you can buy decks of Pokemon cards and then also buy booster packs. Like that is a thing, and sometimes it's just a dice roll. You get what you get. Sometimes you get great cards. Sometimes you don't get the ones you want. And like gachapon machines are like where you put in a coin and you turn the thing and you get whatever toy comes out. Like that's a thing that like has always been a part of you and I's generation. Like that has always been a thing we've kind of accepted as a thing that is. But I also can see a side where it's like people want a product. They want to be able to buy the product they want, not just pay money to get something maybe they don't want. And it is fake money. But as with many games that are real life in-app purchases, I can see like you falling down a hole similar to gambling addiction or customer dissatisfaction. I can understand both sides, I guess. In some ways, it seems like it's just a thing that has always been, and I'm not bothered by it. In other ways, like yeah, maybe this is a convention we don't need anymore that isn't serving the customer. Like, it's fun to, like, buy one of those mystery boxes and see what you get sometimes. But sometimes it's not fun for everybody to, sometimes people just like, I want that thing in the collection. I would like to just buy that thing, not 15 other things in the hope of getting the one I want.
Yeah, there's some like recycling mechanics you can use to get make use of figures you no longer need and stuff like that. So they're not a complete waste, but I mean, this is an evolving thing. Like I said, it does have analogs in the real world, but the virtual one seems to have, like, in some ways, there are fewer impediments and so on and so forth. So
Mm-hmm.
it's something I want to mention because it will come up again when we talk about um, some other Pokemon mobile games out there and sort of what the stuff goes down.
Yeah, I'm surprised that the loot box ban extends to digital apps where the money isn't real and you don't necessarily even have to pay and the figurines aren't real. Like, there's no like consumer destroying the environment issue. Like, that surprises me, but it might be the principle of the thing.
It's a little bit of the principle, and I think it's also, oh gosh, I had a thought in my head about this. Like I said, the lack of kind of friction there. Also, sometimes in some games where you can trade these things, there's a side component where people go on a messaging app or something like that and exchange actual real money for it.
Right.
So
Yeah, that makes sense.
that's the other kind of issue. That's where the each country's IRS equivalent or whatever starts to care,
Yeah,
um,
yes.
and
Yes.
several other government agencies potentially. Um, you know, so that's a consideration
Yeah.
as well. Um, all right. Well, we mentioned a fair bit about the story mode since we mentioned some of the specific battle themes that are in that particular mode. It is kind of loosely patterned, although there are only 6 emblems instead of badges that you can get there, and part of that is because there's only really 6 hotels, and it seems like if you beat the what is seems like the last boss, if you had gotten that far, it gives you a little to be continued, and no, it wasn't.
Right.
Yeah, it was. I actually, part of me wants to. Speaking of video game cartoons, refer to this as being Stat AM'd, as in Sonic Stat AM. The infamous second season ended on a cliffhanger that resolved a lot of things, but left a few stuff, and then the show was canceled, rather infamously. But it's especially odd. Like I'm sure they had plans, and I'm guessing it just never reached that critical mass where they wanted to. But it's weird when you have a game that launches in Japan, in April of 2016, and then does get brought worldwide. Now you'd think if they hadn't already, by the time they bring it worldwide, that's when they would add the additional content. If they could, it seems like if you didn't have at least have that plan, why
Mm.
would you do that then? Because I have to assume that this thing cuts off at the same point in the Japanese version. Um, I don't know. It's just kind of a weird thing to run into, and I think it's something that. But Anne, before I keep going with that, do you have any thoughts you want to interject?
Um, about this specific, like, yeah, like that would just have been some really interesting board meetings around the release of this game to be in on. And like, did they, when they started the US release, were the sales like poor enough in Japan that they knew, like, just release it as it is, we're not doing anything more with this project? I don't know.
It's very strange. The writing, and by the way, you should look up some of the quest dialogue. If it had a Pokemon nature, quirky, I think is the correct one.
I
Believe that's
love it. Starts with like this dude coming in and he's just titled well-dressed boy, and like I felt like I was playing an Otome game for a while, like dating app or something. Oh gosh, and your character like has never participated in this sort of thing before, but they're entering like the world championships. uh,
yeah.
this is a fun game.
The backstory is a bit odd. As I've alluded to, I think they learned a lot from this game that they implemented with DENA. Um, when they were working on Pokemon Masters to let's do this a little bit better. Notably in Pokemon Masters, I believe pretty much the entire like there's a full complete story told in the main game content when that first release or very shortly thereafter. They've added a ton of stuff to it and some extended stories and stuff and an ongoing set of stories there, but it did have a complete thing where you go through the single player campaign in that one. Um, but yeah, this game like it wasn't so unsuccessful. They pulled it like months after release or whatever. But they never finished like the main story. It seems like people have gone in there and it looks like there's some like spots in the code or whatever where the remaining couple of hotels or whatever would go, and then you'd complete the main story and stuff. But none of that ever got implemented. Presumably, there just wasn't enough of a customer base for this game to keep it going. Unlike, say, like this game lasted about. If you count the Japanese release to when it was discontinued, it was about 3.5 years. And Pokemon Masters started in 2019, late in that year. And so that's been going for about 5+ years on that one. That seems to be going quite well. It's not Go level of money, at least during Go's heights, but Pokemon Masters seems to be moving along decently well. And this game, like I said, we talked about like the combat can be extremely frustrating because although there is strategy to it, that last step on when you're doing attacks being, random, it's not inherently bad, but the way it works because you can't even choose a specific attack really takes the control out of you. We talk about the timing. In Japan, this released, 3 or 4 months before Pokemon Go. In everywhere else it released about 6 months after, but also just a few months after Sun and Moon, and I think it just had a lot of competition there, and people just didn't want to get into another mobile Pokemon game. I've also seen that there apparently were a fair number of technical issues at the Western launch involving communication and stuff like that.
That'll do it.
Which, like I said, it's very. Some of these issues are very odd given the fact that this game was released, 8 or 9 months earlier in Japan before the worldwide release, which you think they would have, more things ironed out. But, like I said, I'm not going to call these people, they were probably under-resourced. And like I said, or didn't think that additional effort would have merited the amount of, the number of users they had and so on and so forth. It's just a very strange project from that perspective. And I think it was sort of a collision of things. It's possible that this would have fared better had it released in more of a vacuum. Like, say this had come out in, not sure, Shuffle. I'm trying to remember. That was an XY game. So that was sometime in that generation. But you kind of get the idea there. Like if it had
released in like not that the technology would have supported it, but like in Gen 2 where we didn't have a ton of side games or something.
Yeah. Gen 2, I think you kind of have to start counting the Pokemon mini games there a little bit, but because there's so few games otherwise. But in terms of side games, it's just there's a lot we don't know and probably never will about this and how it came to be. Like, it's not on the base, it's not a bad concept. It's just parts of it are execution, parts of it are timing, and so some of it is definitely quote unquote the game's fault, but very strange there. And like I said, when we get to Pokemon Masters EX, I think we're going to see that they've learned a few things from there that have made that game much more successful.
And that's an interesting point to remember, because the fact is not everything you do creatively is always going to hit the way you think. And there is something really wonderful about a company that kind of is making buttloads of money, has a formula that works extremely well. Like their main series games, they can basically just new region, new gyms, and we will play it every single time and love it to pieces. Like they don't have to reinvent the wheel. And yet every now and then they try something a little bit weird and different, like say making a board game, making a gachapon style collecting game. They made a card game. They made a pinball game. They try a lot of, they made Mystery Dungeon, and like they make a lot of interesting swings, and not all of their swings connect, but they learn from them and apply it to future projects. And I think that's important to remember, that if you want to grow creatively and continue to make better and better games, make better and better art, you have to sometimes try things that don't work. And sometimes that means releasing a game that sort of falls on its face a little bit. But that is part of becoming better. And yeah, like, so I can't criticize them too much for that, because like it's definitely not my favorite game. It's not great, but the fact that they made it gave them Pokemon Masters, which is great. The fact that they made it means they can learn from it and flex other creative muscles and bring us better and better games in the future. So
yeah, I don't think they lost their shirts over this or anything like that.
No.
It's also, speaking of Go, that drained the company's resources in terms of, workers and stuff like that. It's possible that if they were in the process of doing the remaining gyms, that maybe that when that struck the earth,
that's true. It could have pulled a lot of people off of a project and onto another one.
Yeah, and maybe they were contractually obligated on some level to release the game elsewhere. Who knows? That can happen too. But yeah, very strange story that, like I said, we'll probably get bits and pieces of, but never know the full picture. It's just one of those things.
Indeed.
Okay, so that seems to have worked out pretty well. So thank you, everyone. Like I said, if you have any thoughts, if you played this, and like I said, I kind of regret. I mean, well, for Pokemon Masters, I got to play a demo of that at Worlds 2019. I didn't think a ton of it at the time. Of course, I couldn't actually hear it either. When we do a music discussion on Pokemon Masters, boy, will we have a lot to talk about. My goodness, that is a game I am looking towards discussing on the level of a Mystery Dungeon or a Smash Brothers game. It is that interesting. Not to say that every track is 100% amazing, but they have done some incredible stuff with that game. When I first played it, when it came out in late 2019, it was just astounding in terms of like the quality of a lot of the stuff there. Not all of it is done with live instruments, which it doesn't have to be, but and it's also been a big influence on my interview stuff because of all the voice actors. We mentioned that Duel does not have voice acting, but this Masters, of course, doesn't have full voice acting, but it has voice acting for a lot of the characters, and that's given me a lot more folks I can interview. Being able to find folks at conventions and other places like that, it adds a lot of names to my list. So, but like I said, I do think they took some of the lessons here when they were working with DENA, given the 3.5 year gap or so between the release of the two games, if you count the original Japanese release of Duel. That I think they just learned a ton of stuff there.
Probably, yeah.
That I think Masters EX, I mean, it still gets a lot of criticism for its gachapon mechanics and so on and so forth. But and also stuff like the trading card game Pocket, which has turned out to be pretty decent. It's easier to get cards there than in real life, but sorry, I try not to make too many jokes like that. I know that the people at the Pokemon Company are hard workers. Who often get dealt by real life a difficult hand with the amount of speculators in the trading card game market these days. But
that's okay. My love of Magikarp extends to my love of cheap, not rare at all, speculator-free cards. So
yeah, there's only
I'm doing okay.
Unless it's shiny Magikarp or a special promo card or something, it's not going to be rare.
I tend to gravitate to cards that just strike my heart in the right way, and usually those are not the ones that are worth anything to speculators. So, like I said, I'm fine. Pokemon's got me covered.
Yeah, the store I go to for both for trading card game and for video game league, I go to both of those. They're on different days. Got cleaned out of Journey Together very quickly.
Whoa.
Yeah, so it's just that kind of thing. That is, I guess, one good thing with Gachapon games is unlike a physical Gachapon machine, it can't run out of stock.
That is a plus.
All right, folks. Well, thank you to everyone who tuned in. Like I said, our next discussion, presumably next month, depending on scheduling, will be Pokemon. Will be Magikarp Jump. So we're looking forward to that. All right, folks. Thanks.